The word yoga, as most of you doubtless know, junction, yoke, union, all these words are basically from the same root. And so likewise, when Jesus said, "My yoke is easy," he was saying, really, my yoga is easy.
You're listening to the Yoga Podcast.
Okay, Shelley, thank you so much for coming on to the very first episode of my podcast. And to give a little context about how we know each other to inform our audience, I was introduced by a mutual friend and a student, Bill. You know him really well. And he originally told me about you and the classes that he went to. And I was curious. I'm like, I don't know who this Shelley is, but I'm curious because he was doing a teacher training with you. And when I went to your first class, I knew that there was something there for me that you that really resonated with me. Yeah, it only took one class, and right after that, we had a conversation outside, and I said, okay, I'm signed up for your first teacher training. And ever since then, we have a lot of different types of relationships, I guess you could say. I was originally your student, but then we became friends, and now we are partners in teaching our own teacher training, and this is our second year doing it. And this is why I'm also really excited to be interviewing you for the very first podcast, because although I know you, there's always a part of you that is mysterious. And I've heard of you being the quote-unquote underground yoga teacher. Where does that name come from? Why do you have that?
Probably because I shy away from technology, as far as just underground, in the sense you probably have to find me word of mouth like you did from Bill, or, I don't have Facebook, and I'm a minimalist when it comes to marketing myself even, like a lot of yoga teachers do. And maybe what I offer too is a little bit, has its own undertones and flavors of working a lot with the light, but also a lot with the shadow, and practices beyond just asana for me. Mm-hmm. So I delve into and kind of ask students to question themselves and not just take what they're served. And yoga is just a class they come into and they leave. For me, I offer a little bit more, and I'm sure a lot of teachers do this as well. So I guess that name, underground, maybe I talk about death a lot, and I share a lot of mythology, which always has a darker edge to it, and encourage self-observation in maybe a more ruthless way, where I'm not afraid to go to what we're afraid of, or work with being uncomfortable in the class, or the awkward moments, or so maybe it's a little more edgy and serious as far as that goes, or yeah.
And so when you say shadow, do you mean the things that we're afraid of, or the things that make us uncomfortable? Is that what you mean?
Sure, that's the mild things, but then there's literally blind spots where you can't see. And sometimes it takes just a teacher, someone else, being that mirror looking at you, can point those things out, because you're literally blind. It's dark. And that's a little fiery, because you have to be kind of willing to maybe want to step into that mirror.
would you say there are some very common blind spots that a lot of people have that don't see?
Well, speaking just from my own experience, because common blind spots.
What are some blind spots that you've had to uncover and now realize that that's...
Well, they're still in the process of revealing itself. I mean, sometimes it feels like I've brought a little light more to the vastness of the darkness, which helps the navigating to go deeper. But often it's the classic things you learn even in the tradition of yoga philosophy, where it's our desires, our grasping, our attachments, and the way we interact with the world. You know, I usually go into examples using relationships because that seems more so tangible and relative. So, like, I'll probably share inadvertently some of my own personal work, but more in a general way, like, you know, showing up in a relationship already full, present, ready and available to serve, not needy, desiring them to fill you up, or, you know, but also staying raw and vulnerable to the not feeling safe. You know, we want to feel safe in relationships. We want it to all be like have control and predicting what's going to happen next, and we really can't, and it stunts the growth of a relationship. So that's always a good area to work in, and then you end up seeing that in your own self. You know, you can get stagnant.
What does it mean to play safe inside of a relationship?
What do I mean? This is more like Vajrayana Buddhist perspective is you can't get security from insecurity. There's that dance of the paradox, but it's like we seek, every time we think it's safe, there's that aspect of, oh, I have him right where I want him, and it's going to produce this thing next. And the mechanics, we can call it ego because that's an easy way to describe it. The ego's function is to continue to produce security, survival, safeness, you know, rather than being able to rest in the unknown, rest in insecurity.
Not having control.
Ambiguity, you know, to be rest in what's and that allows the relationship to be spontaneous and freedom and growth versus, you know, I'm going to control that person. And
well, these are all the reasons why I study with you and why I've always been attracted to your teaching. So we'll pull back a little bit because we're going really deep.
Yeah, that can go on forever.
Tell us a little bit about your yoga practice timeline from like when you started, and what are some of the pivotal moments that marked your evolution to where you are now? Because you are a teacher and you're obviously a very dedicated student too.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of us, we were doing yoga when it was unpopular, so it was more, like you'd say, underground, less mainstream, where we had to find it in unique situations. So I think definitely the philosophy aspect I've studied for a very long time, feels like. So that's a little bit different than the asana. I'll just focus on asana yoga. It started really in New Brunswick when I lived there, and I came across a very wise Buddhist woman, and she happened to teach Hatha yoga. And how we met was I was a pretty radical environmentalist, and I was saving some trees, and she read one of my articles in the newspaper and sought me out, and because she was quite an activist too, and then we hooked up, and she took me under her wing. Really, I got personal instruction for several years. Just her whole lifestyle was a yoga lifestyle, how she moved in the world, everything. So I observed it, and I was quite young, so a lot of it I didn't even know what I was seeing, to the point of how she even treated her water.
Wow.
And how she drank it. Or now, like later on throughout the years, I've had bursts of insights because I observed her so well and almost like lived with her for a couple of years that now I know more depth and context of why she did what she did all the time. So she taught me asana yoga, but so much more. And then I moved to Florida, and I just started Ashtanga yoga with Jay Martin, and I would only go to his foundational classes, and because I'm a kind of student that waits to be initiated. I don't grab it. And so I was just going to his foundational classes almost every day, and he finally came up to me and says, "Shelley, why don't you just come to my primary series? Your practice is much better than most people, that go." Then I said, "Okay, that mean I'm ready." I waited for him to invite me, and then I started going, and then we became friends like you. He was my teacher. We became friends, but I always respected him as my teacher. And then I was avidly, practicing Ashtanga every day. And then one day he just said, "You're a teacher." He made me teach. He threw me in classes.
So back in the day, there wasn't the 200-hour yoga teacher training.
And then he just taught me how to teach for 2 years straight. Wow. And mentored me. It was just like this other woman, this Buddhist. It was like one-on-one mentorship for years of the experience of living a lifestyle of yoga. And so it wasn't a teacher training, with a group of people. I'd go to workshops and specialized things in therapeutics and stuff. But with him it was a deep mentorship. And then he just threw me in. He said, "You're a teacher now."
Was that something that you wanted? Did you want to be a teacher?
No, I didn't ask for it or anything. It wasn't something. No, I never even thought about it, to be honest, before then.
And then how did you feel when he's like, "Okay, you're going to teach my classes now, or you're going to teach this class at this time"?
I was nervous. I mean, I had high expectations of what that meant. So it was like a lot of new teachers. You're really hard on yourself. But I did okay.
Well, obviously you're a teacher now.
My best, and then I moved around a lot. So then I moved back here to Canada after that, and continued just avidly studying as a student more so, and teaching. But I worked with children mostly. I decided I'm going to just teach children. I'll have to earn teaching adults.
Wow.
I decided after Florida I wasn't going to teach adults. I'm just going to teach children. So, and I was working with children. I had my own with me all the time. So I only taught children for several years until those children's parents would observe me and go, "When are you going to teach us?" Literally, it was like the universe was again saying, giving me a signal of what to do next. And so I started teaching children with their parents. And then they wouldn't leave me, these students, so they would start with their babies, and then here I am, then the babies are growing up in my classes, literally same group of women for a while, and they really bonded. So there's a lot of, I always had a sense of community. I tend to build and enjoy building community. So they really bonded, and it was quite nice for them because it can be isolating. And then I kept asking more, when are you just going to teach adults? So then that evolved. And then it was continuing from there. And all the while I was constantly taking trainings and studying and practicing, and to the point when my spiritual teacher suggested, or we talked about doing more serious training, and she even ignited the whole, well, maybe you should go away and do a training. So she picked this training for me in Montreal. I studied there for a while. And then I met Christina Sell in India when we were traveling all there together. So I did more training with her, then ended up hosting her here. And it was just an evolution of hosting a lot of teachers in Vancouver, building community that way through the Anusara. And it was quite a rigorous program to get certified in. So it required a lot of hours with philosophers and teachers, as well as the founder. So here I am. I mean, there's probably lots more there, but...
Well, since you mentioned your spiritual teacher, and I have a glimpse of your relationship with her, let's dive into that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't have a true understanding of what it's like to have a guru. And, you know, that word's kind of tossed around a lot, you know. Some people might think they have a guru and they say, well, you know, my yoga practice is my guru, or the teacher down the street in my local studio is my guru. But I think your relationship to your guru is a lot different. So could you tell the audience a little bit about what does it really mean for you to practice guru yoga, and what is your relationship to your guru like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even for me to continue to ask, really, what is the relationship to the guru? That's always evolving and changing. That's always a question I keep and questioning. So over 16 years ago, I met her. And it was a very pivotal moment for me to meet her. I was practicing Kundalini Yoga, so it was timely that I met her. I was in a very fiery, like really looking for something more serious. I was looking for more than just, go to the yoga studio and get taught a yoga class, or, you know, go to some talks and discover more about self-improvement. And, you know, I wanted more than that. I was a very restless kind of person where I would quickly see, or I would quickly see what wasn't really true, or kind of surface level very quickly. I wasn't very satisfied with surface level of things, and I really wanted to go deep. So I was searching for a teacher inwardly for a very long time. And when she did appear, Lalita is her name, and we met in Vancouver, actually. I wasn't living here. I was still living in the States. And then there was a recognition between us, especially she recalled and remembered me. So, and that's, you know, interesting. And my relationship to her was one, and still is one, of being very devotional. That's sort of my leaning towards that relationship, is more bhakti, like devotional. But it does encompass other qualities, of course. And you're in relationship with the human being also, with the personality and quirks and interests, and these things in addition to what maybe is better defined as the guru function. Because it's more of a function than it is a person. So the guru function is, you start to, when you observe it long enough and you study it, it does end up revealing its function to you, which is to bring you to the deepest relationship and connection to the divine. And what that means for you individually can vary, but she's always continually pointed me, to that purpose, even though sometimes it's very difficult because the ego has a function too, and the ego's function wants the guru dead. And the guru's function is kind of wants to rattle the ego and kind of tame the mind and go beyond the mind and just the neurotic emotions and who we think we are. We're constantly questioning the assumptions, the projections of who we think we are. It's very unsettling. Sometimes so much so, it's difficult to keep your seat. Part of just working in Guru Yoga is keeping your seat.
What does that mean, keeping your seat?
Just like an asana, coming back to the mat every day. Even if you don't want to be there. The resistance to sit and meditate every day. Or so it's kind of, it has that in the bigger, what you'd call Guru Yoga. Like, you got to show up and participate, even when you're, most of what your mind is telling you wants to run away or is very afraid, or like, again, about the insecurity, or it wants to be safe, it wants to be in control, but you're kind of willfully obeying someone else. But it's willful, it's alert, it's not like blind following, it's you're choosing.
Have you always been willful in your choosing of obeying your guru, or has it been a process over time where you've learned to be more trusting and willful?
Yeah, I think because when I met her, I was very already trained, so my attempt at it was very probably very immature at surrendering and obeying, and I was so eager. It was a bit ridiculous. So that burnt out a little bit so I could grow. And then there was this period of adolescence you almost go through where you rebel a little, or you really work with the obstacles. And then there's a kind of maturing that happens over time. It's very humbling, because even now, after 16 years, that's really, you just only feel like you're scratching the surface of just basic growing up.
And it seems like you've kept with this practice. Obviously, you've been doing it for 16 years. Why have you chosen this particular spiritual path as opposed to, there's so many out there, Buddhism, Kundalini Yoga, you were doing Kundalini Yoga before. Why not just Hatha Yoga? Like, what's the defining difference, or what keeps you committed?
It captures you. I mean, it's a very all-encompassing. When you see truth, when you see inside something, it's very hard to go back to anything that doesn't have that same amount of potency, like what she has available. There's so much more than. This is a difficult question, because to me, it's very hard for me to think about not being in this work almost. Well, that's an important question. I don't know how much to open it up. It's sort of like I've always known her.
Mm-hmm.
Lifetimes.
Sure.
Like I've had experiences where, and it's not something I'm even choosing.
Would you say it compares to the feeling of you go to a place you've never been to, let's say India or Thailand, and you arrive there and you feel like, I've lived here before, or I've been here, that sense of being home.
There's definitely a sense of home. Yeah, I remember feeling that the first time. And I wouldn't settle for anything different in the sense because the guru leaves you always a bit on edge and a bit like wrestling a little bit with yourself. There's never there's moments of great joy, peace, happiness, extraordinary moments. But that's like the after effect. Really, it's because it's a tantric path also. I mean, it's an always edge place. So it's not really, you're not searching for like satisfaction or happiness. There's always kind of more hanging over you, and it's very ruthless in that, where you're constantly, you almost discover you can't do this alone, and that's why the Buddhists say the guru, or they say the Buddha. You need the three jewels: the Buddha, or for me, the guru, the Sangha, and then the Dharma.
Mm-hmm. So you're mentioning Sangha, meaning community, right? And I've been told that, like you said, in order to be quote unquote successful in this practice, you must have Sangha. And one of my teachers, Michael Stone, said that really you only need just one person, and that's considered Sangha. And you don't even really need to like them. You just need to practice with them.
Yeah. Can
you tell me about, what your interaction, your dynamics have been like with your Sangha? Because it's not a huge group, but it is built into a network where I've seen all of you work together in relationship to your guru. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've really grown to love my Sangha, People, like you said, you wouldn't ordinarily choose to be your friends who agree with you, who, are always compatible with your preferences and stuff like that. So we're kind of like a mix of different parts that sometimes conflict and rub up against one another. It's sort of like a tumbling thing. We're all tumbling and rubbing up against one another, sort of polishing and shining each other also at the same time. And then there's a lot of support, and good company is like having the right food to nourish your body. It's also seen as the body of the guru's work, literally parts of the body. So you need a package like one particular style of student, even if they're the one that rubs you, right, into the mix, and then there's tender, sweet relationships also in that. And also because to do this work alone is very difficult, although we do a lot. Ultimately, you are doing it alone, and you take responsibility for your own practice, but it sure is nice to share it with others.
Mm-hmm. What are some things that you do together to support one another?
we've done so many different things. It's so wild. The last thing we did, we all went to the horse races. I mean, that was just wild. Every horse my teacher bet on, she won, you know? And it was thrilling, and it was like we go to weird environments sometimes, or we once had a alter ego. We dressed up as our alter ego, and
I mean, these are very unconventional, quote unquote, spiritual things.
Very strange things. Like you went gambling. I mean, horse racing is gambling. But if you read Dr. Robert Svoboda's Karma book, you know, it's all about horse racing and karma. And you go into different environments to shake up again your assumptions, your projections. What is spiritual? What's not spiritual? Well. In Tantra, you use everything, absolutely everything. So it's not necessarily your preferences. And I mean, even going to a movie out together, for example, there's always teachings available when you're in the company of the guru, because it's like, who picks the movie? Well, she picks the movie, and you get to observe yourself. Do you say, "Oh, I've already seen that movie"? What about going to this movie? Oh, can I get popcorn? You know, we all want our own thing going on, and you get to watch that inside. And sometimes the practice is, can you just go to the movie, be delightful in relationship, show up, and not have your preferences satisfied? It's very interesting what triggers people.
I mean, it must be different than going to a movie with your partner or with your friends.
Yeah, you want to talk about it.
Right.
And
I mean, it must be a different experience. Are you on edge all the time when you're going to a movie, you know, a movie which is supposed to be entertaining and relaxing? Is it a whole other different type of experience when you're around your guru?
It has been, but you know, I've come to a point where I just love being in her company so often. Now I just delight in whatever we're doing, and maybe some of those previous attachments I had to things have fallen away a little bit, because I feel more at ease just whatever we're doing. You know, present, alert, available.
All of it's fruits for your practice.
Right.
Yeah.
The point isn't the movie.
Whereas that's often our point.
Like we went to the Apple Festival. What was it called? The Apple Festival. And she even said this to us, even before we went, everybody had to share about the Apple Festival. Well, there's going to be too many people there. Or I don't even like apples. I'm allergic to apples. I mean, she had to deal with so many people talking about the Apple Festival, and it hadn't even happened yet. So we went as a group. We got lost. I mean, people didn't find us. I mean, it had all these dynamics. And in the end, she says, it's not about the Apple Festival. But normally, that's what we do all day long, is we choose to go do something, and it's about the thing and whatever. But with her, it's, can we actually keep our focus of our attention on what we're doing together as a group, or on the guru, or on what's being served, what's available in the universe, like what are we being offered, the gifts here to work with. And you know, we're pulsating between being awake and sleep all day long with these things, is what she has hinted at. So it's always interesting where we're going to go. You never know.
And it's like in the yoga studio as well. It's never about the yoga poses.
Right.
It is and it isn't, right?
Yeah.
It's much more than that. And I think that's what's always attracted me to the practice and to also your teaching. Because I always felt like there was another aspect of life that I was also yearning for or seeking for, kind of similar to where you were, you know, restless, and I felt lost, and I wanted purpose or meaning. I just didn't know what I actually wanted, but I knew I wanted something else. And I think that also might be an element that attracts a lot of people to yoga as well. You know, it is a very big industry. do you feel that from your students or from just the community in general that students are wanting something more, whatever that more is?
I think everyone is, and yet it may not be obvious to them, when they're first coming into a yoga studio. Maybe they're coming because their doctor recommended, do some yoga, you have some healing to do here. And then they come in, but then they might hear something that points to more self-awareness or a sense of care and respect for themselves, or, what am I saying to myself all day long? Maybe some self-love is built over time, definitely self-improvement, which is a good thing, for anyone. And then sometimes I'll hear students who've practiced with me for years, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they said, wow, I think I might even be a bit of a mystic now, or then there's some deeper questions they're asking now. But I think it takes time, and it's very individual. And it's also the responsibility of the teacher to present the opportunity, or even work with building the space almost so that the opportunity can arrive in this space. It's a difficult thing because it's not just a teacher doing something or saying something particularly. It's working with all the influences, and then you see what happens in the space, and then you if you're paying attention, if you've worked with your attention, which is a very powerful resource, you can pick up on those things and then be able to work with that and present it to students. I like when students ask questions, and I want to know where a lot of them are at, especially if I see them every day for all these years. And so it's not just I'm just serving up some poses to them. I would like, to inspire them to want to know more and question, but I also don't think it's necessary for everybody. So there's a variety of things that can happen for people, I think, in their experience of yoga. And it could be just enough to have the yoga teacher, because I am by no means a guru, so I can't be that function for them, but I can provide some insight into the deeper teachings, the philosophy, and workings in and through the body, just because of my own experience.
Yeah. And do you think do you feel that there's been times where students may have placed the responsibility of you being their quote unquote guru to advise them on their life, or to expect something from you above and beyond what you may consider to be your role as your teacher?
I don't think so much, because I'm very careful at clarifying that. It's very different to just be a teacher versus a guru, for one thing, or a guide or a mentor. I can mentor practices, and I have a degree in psychology and a diploma in social work. So those things are just useful levels of working with your mind, your emotions, and I have personal experiences where I've had insights, again, just in relationship with how my guru has worked with me. So I can share those just from my experience. But the function of the guru is a completely different thing here. So I don't want to be mistaken for that. And I think I'm very clear if anyone puts those projections onto me.
Yeah.
I'm clear about that. But I really do enjoy mentoring. It's at the level of if there's anybody who comes to me with questions, they meet my guru, like you have.
Yes.
I said, I can't, I think you asked me some serious questions once. And I said, I can no longer help you, Leo, at this level. I remember, I even know the quality of questions when people start to ask me, I'm not qualified. I'm okay admitting that. So I remember saying, yeah, this is not my realm for you, So I'm happy to direct.
Yeah. Yeah, and I asked this question because I think our role as a yoga teacher is always evolving and changing. Like we're not just fitness instructors, although we do play a very similar role of working with people's bodies. Yet we're also not therapists or psychologists or spiritual teachers. Yet sometimes those roles or those ways of beings just come out, whether it's conscious or unconscious. We can serve in those ways sometimes for people just by holding space. Maybe we haven't even said anything and something comes about inside that room. And I think that's a very unique thing that I myself as a yoga teacher is navigating. What is my role inside of the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a good question, and get feedback even, on. I was given feedback by a Sangha mate to take more risks in my yoga classes, so I've really taken that on in the last probably 5-6 years since he gave me that advice. And
what does it mean to take more risk?
Yeah, for me, because I've reflected back now and it is to be a little bit more of that edgy, like, I learned in Anusara, like, make sure everyone leaves very happy. And that doesn't really get you that far. It's sort of never been my personal goal. Like, if you leave happy, I am so happy for you. And, something happened that produced, that stayed in you. How wonderful. But that, again, has never been my goal, I realized. And personally, in my own spiritual practice, so how can I teach that? Or how can I say, I got to make sure... And it puts this heavy burden on yoga teachers, I think, to have this persona even. Yeah. And some people come and leave even more sore, or they're detoxing. So it's like, how do you say to people who are just starting yoga, well, it's not going to feel good for a while. Or, we might start talking about death. I mean, I'm okay people not liking me. That's a good thing to get over. But taking risks, talking about death. Yeah. I mean, it's not usually your happy subject. Or what I'm comfortable taking risks now is bringing more of the teachings that I am more steeped in versus they're probably a little bit different because I have a living master I work with. But I only can teach what I know. Yeah. So I study texts deeply, and they relate to what I learned with my guru, but I probably less and less share what I learned from yoga teachers and more what I learned from my spiritual teacher. Yeah. But I think that's a maturity over time thing. Absolutely. It wasn't like that in the beginning. I was very restrained in those areas.
Yeah. And clearly the way you have lived your life and do live your life is quite unique, and not everyone has this experience. And so your offering to the public is therefore also unique and may not be what you conventionally see in the quote-unquote yoga industry. I think yoga is an industry, and it certainly is, whether we like it or not, or we want to call it something different. Yeah. If you had an opportunity to shift the way things are, or if you had a magic wand and said, hey, I want to make this change about how things are run Is there something that you would do?
Well, another piece of wise advice from a Sangha mate was to just go in and teach really good yoga and leave, because I remember when the politics were shifting, we knew it was going to, like anything, there's a level where it gets watered down. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it can bring in other new ideas and growth, but we all know what that also produces. And I think it would just be useful as the industry gets bigger to remember that it creates an ego. And like for me, with that perspective opens up that its function is to survive, to pay the bills, to, and then it's like, and so we might lose some of the quality of the teaching for quantity, or the quality of even what studentship is versus the guest coming in. I like the idea of the guest, but I think of the guest very differently. That word, even in the context of the guest, to me, I'm more in the Sufi realm there, but it's like, I think there's something wonderful about calling ourselves students.
Yes.
So, because I love that, making oneself constantly ready and evolving, and showing up, taking your seat, even is a way of describing studentship. But I think, like, people who come to my yoga classes are often, that is what I attract, is that quality. So it's still there in the industry. So that's what's beautiful, is that I think, like the Buddha, you can remain in the city, so to speak, or you can remain in the world, in the marketplace, fully participating, fully alive in with whatever is in front of you, and serving that, even though it's in this package of this industry with this ego. I think the thing is not to kid ourselves and forget that it's building an ego of its own.
True.
So now there's a yoga ego function that's happening. And just knowing that it's running the machine. And so how do you want to show up as a teacher teaching your classes? What do you... I just wouldn't compromise my own values. I'm willing, though, to do almost anything. So as I say that, I also hear myself, well, I'm interested in what's interesting, so I'll continue to grow. But is this making sense?
It does make sense. And I've learned that from you over time, and modeled a lot of my teaching and ways of being inside of a classroom. From what I've learned from you, would you give any advice to teachers that may be struggling? They're on their own, and they're feeling just swallowed by life, or by the way things are in the yoga industry, and they are just running around trying to pay bills, or trying to make ends meet, or not feeling like they can be their authentic selves inside of a studio. What can you offer to them? Yeah,
that one is a good question, because it starts with yourself. I think you have to show up for your practices. It's going to come down to doing, meditating at home, practicing your asana, your pranayama, or the yamas and niyamas as best as you know every day in everything you do, or showing up to your classes prepared, like you're doing the work. and constantly growing yourself. That's going to produce a presence of being in oneself that will meet those obstacles with integrity, or will build discernment and discrimination. What is, like, by teaching at this particular studio, am I compromising, or am I willing to compromise? It's, yeah, I could eat that and pay for it, or or saying no, yes, wisely. But again, I know what you mean. It's a bit of a market out there. So I would start with yourself and your own practices, because they strengthen you. That's where you're going to get your stamina, your strength to teach like crazy and run around the city and be giving all the time. And you have to recharge. You have to take care of yourself. And keep investigating and self-observing and growing in that way. There's no end, see?
No top end.
No top end is what,
Do you have a daily ritual or evening ritual that you do for yourself?
Yeah, it starts to unfold like everything's a ritual, in the sense of just everyday living. I mean, even choosing what you eat, to putting your food in the compost, to, just what is in front of you. It's that simple. It's very simple, actually, just being with what's next in the moments. But more seriously, practices like sitting meditation every day, puja, study, diet, definitely working with food, substances that way, and right sexuality, right relationship, physical exercise. Doesn't even have to be yoga.
Yeah. Corey, who is one of your students, and I know Corey through one of the teacher trainings that you offered in the past, he's got a question for you similar to what we're talking about here, and he wants to know if you can give him any advice on how to engage the mainstream population in some more disciplined practices of the mind and body, say meditation, because for me, I started out just doing yoga asana, just doing yoga pauses, and that was good. And then I think a lot of students then eventually want to seek out some other types of practices that yoga asana can't offer. So how do you take the next step? What are some tangible, practical ways that people can practice?
Yeah. Well, for him personally, or as a teacher, again, if you have that practice, it feeds, like it kind of pours out of you. I know a lot of yoga teachers that don't have a meditation practice. They're excellent teachers, and I think people really want to have meditation practice. It's probably the hardest, because it is about just doing nothing, and there's some boredom there, and you have to, it's really years of listening to your mind. So definitely my first, again, advice is just to practice these things that you actually do want to bring to the mainstream. The other thing is you have to be really realistic about the mainstream. In the sense of not everybody's looking for that, again, at the different times. So you learn how to skillfully serve where people are at. And you give them what they need a little bit and what they want. So what they need is maybe you introduce meditation by incorporating meditation in your yoga asanas. 5 minutes, or we're going to meditate and talk about why and how and educate people. But, and working, if you're going to introduce meditation, you kind of also have to work with talking about how to deal with the mind. So you have to know a little bit about that. So studying is good. There's lots of books on meditation, these kinds of things. And sometimes you just wait. It's like little seeds you plant, you see it. I feel really lucky because I have students I've seen and worked with, the same students for years. It's a little more rare, in the sense of being able to have that. But if you can, teach progression sessions or something where you can actually work with the same person for a long period of time. Because you can't tell it all. You can't say, oh, do all these great things. They're all great. So many people have obstacles and resistances and in place and, Does that answer the question?
It does.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
I've learned from you about how to approach meditation in bite sizes.
Yeah.
Because
really.
it's a discipline. It's like anything. If you want to go on a particular type of diet, it requires a discipline. If you want to do some sort of fitness routine or anything that you apply yourself to life where it requires your long-term commitment, it's tough. And so I think a lot of people are interested in meditation, and they may sit for a couple of days, a week, maybe even a month, and then a lot of them, fall out of it.
Yeah.
And perhaps they're biting on too much too soon, or they don't have a community or sangha to practice with. Now, you having a sangha and community to practice with is great. And do you have any advice for the people that are just starting out, who are interested, want to learn, they have the interest, but maybe not have the practical tools into continuing it long term?
Well, I think you kind of answered yourself in a way, because it's just starting with little commitments, like saying, okay, I'm going to intentionally, like when I work in mentorship, as you know, I sort of make everybody accountable, even when they're not meditating, to write about it and inform me, just so that they have a soundboard against to kind of hear themselves, a witness. So I real nail down the commitment, well, what can you do? Like, how big is this commitment? You almost have to deal with people's psychology a lot of, like, how big is this commitment compared to eating chocolate? I'm sure that one you're really committed to, and there's no doubt about it, no obstacles or resistances there. Or the things that we do a lot, we feed all day long. Or we say, our biggest excuse to meditation is I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But I bet you if we broke down what you did in a day, there would be lots of time available. So this busyness needs to almost, like, there's so many layers even before sometimes meditation is approached,
right,
because we're already setting things up to not meditate, even though there's this interest growing, which is great. So, yeah, even when I mentor, I'll have people commit to, because they want this also to understand discipline, right? 5 minutes, 3 times a week, and certain time of the day, same place, what all yoga teachers learn, how to advise people with meditation. And then we see what happens. We see what comes up. And most of the time it's, I'm not practicing, and why. And then we just look at that and go, and then some people fall into using the not practicing to beat themselves up about it. I mean, it's just, it's endless, really. And it's all fuel for understanding where you're at. You have to work with where you're at. I think, a lot of people go onto these big meditation retreats and stuff, and it's great because I think you get to dive in and go deep but often they'll come home and not repeat it repetitively at home. So I think the little at a time, but through repetition.
Yes.
Which is abhyasa, right? We're bringing that word into our next teacher training. I chose that, particularly abhyasa and bhava, which means life or the mood or the juice, and kind of that mood, because it's repeated practice, no end.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't even have this final outcome we're looking for either. What if it was just practice, no end? We want maybe we're wanting meditation to be happy. Well, it might be an after effect, but I tell you, it's not really the reality of why we're meditating. So, I mean, it might be through breakthroughs and clarity and insight, and that's all wonderful. But initially, often it's just, wow, you get to see how many times you think about this one thing over and over again, and that's what you're spending time on, and then you have to sit with that, and then it often shifts or falls away. But these thoughts go unnoticed or hum along in the background when we're not sitting with them. So we distract ourselves, we keep ourselves busy, because we don't really want to know these things. They're very hard,
So you mentioned our teacher training, which we're going to be hosting in February. What are you excited to be teaching? Like, what's the vision that you have for our teacher training?
Yeah. Well, I like this theme because I thought about it a lot, and every time I teach a teacher training, and it's always evolving, because I'm always growing. I'm always constantly studying new ways of teaching, new ways of going into things, exiting things, and so I get very excited, and then I'm interested to dive into this theme of abhyasa, repeated practice with devotion, and maybe bring some of that studentship back, and the more quality to, like you're saying, being able to discover and get excited about all the different practices that are available, and bring back the idea of discipline. I mean, that's what excites me. When I say it out loud, it almost doesn't seem like fun, but I think it's a lot of fun.
Personally, that's what I live for.
Right?
And I'm excited for you to come back from India after your 2-month trip. You're going to be steeped in the culture and the teachings, and I'm really happy for you to have that opportunity to go.
Yeah, I think India will definitely bring in new influences for sure, and stories and experiences. And what I love about teacher trainings is I get to revisit the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita again, like for the how many times, or the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, like these texts that are valuable, and or the principles of alignment, or the elements and the tattvas and everything that I really enjoy teaching, or even like detailing how to teach subtle cueing and techniques, and seeing people transform in a teacher training, going, oh, that's how you do that pose? Like, really? Like almost waking up to yoga for the very first time.
Absolutely.
Like all they've been doing is maybe exercise to that point. So it's so enriching, even if someone doesn't want to be a teacher. And every time I revisit that information, it's like it's that repeated practice again, going back to the Gita. Well, what reveals is a whole nother level. And it's just this repeated and more insights. It's like a sutra you can't, or a mantra, or mudra, or all these things. We might do once, I mean, that's just so surface. I mean, you have to keep going back and diving deeper and deeper, and then you do get those richer jewels or clarity and insight that bring you to the most simplest realizations that you can move through the world with ease, even be okay with not being okay. You know, you're very calm, relaxed in probably stressful situations. In the past, you would have collapsed for days. You find yourself picking things up very easily. Like the effects of practicing in this way definitely are wonderful and beneficial. Just to be able to be a kinder person and generous and compassionate to others who are around you, not quick to judge somebody. You know, judgment is very interesting, where that person you realize is not any different than you, not separate from you. This is a piece of exactly who you are, and when you can really see that and experience that, and doesn't mean you have to be with that person or anything, but yeah, it really broadens a compassionate view the more you repeat practices. And there's no guarantee.
Yeah. Well, at least for me, from my experience, the training that I got from you is exactly that. And this is why I'm continually grateful to have any opportunity to work with you, whether it's doing a podcast or doing a teacher training together, hosting a retreat. I always get to be a teacher and a student at the same time. And like you said, every time you come back to things you thought you learned, a whole new lesson pops up. So I'm just really happy and grateful, like I said, to know you and to have this relationship with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for co-teaching with me. I'm glad we get to share in this process because it's quite fun. I think it builds your teaching, and I think it continues with that mentorship and helping one another and sharing in this love of yoga together. That's also with the industry. I just ran into another old teacher yesterday on the street, and when we see each other, there's like a group of 12 of us, really, from the roots here, to some degree, of the yoga history in Vancouver, I guess you can call it. But we remember with such fondness those times where we deeply connected, because we're a little more isolated now.
What's the difference? Why are we more
I don't know.
isolated now?
We talked about it. Him and I were like, wow, we miss the good old days. Maybe it's like that. You get older and you miss the good old days or something. But there is a difference. And yet I like to think about it also in the sense of not clinging to the old thinking that's better, but also to go, like, even it's fall right now. So we're sitting here, look at all the falling leaves. Can you allow those leaves to fall and rot and do their cycle so that it grows and nurtures, composts the earth so the new springs come up, right?
So perhaps we're just in a phase.
I think so. I can't speak to the bigger philosophies of where we are as humanity and world there, but just in my own experience, I think, so we can also just appreciate, what we've had in the past and be very grateful for the ground on which we're standing on, and continue to show up with that same integrity, same mood to continue to produce community. If that's what's important, you do that. You do that in many ways. I've seen in your work. You're always reaching out to other teachers. How can I build connection, right? I mean, we're all doing that in our own unique way. Even though it's not like, oh, the Kula back then when it was like this. And it had a life and it needed to die too.
And new things pop up.
Right.
And
it needed to end, and rightfully so that this undercurrent can rise and change. Because change is inevitable, so it's how we move through those changes regardless. I mean, and always go back to your own personal, how am I with my practices right now? That's where, just keep it real. Rather than continually looking out, well, maybe that doesn't have integrity over there outside of me, but to turn that right away. As soon as that judgment wants to leave you, it's like, well, how is my practice over here? Or, my relationship with my children or my mate or whatever it is my best relationship with God right now, with the divine. That is where I'm at. You could see it that way. Very practical.
Interesting. Okay, so I have one more final question. We talked a little bit about the past and also just what's happening now presently with the yoga community. What do you see is the next step, or what do you envision for the yoga community? Where do you think it's going to eventually go? Or does your mind even go there?
Yeah, it might not too often, because I kind of show up for the day. I kind of work on being very present and going like, what can I serve today? What's going to be presented to me? And I get very inspired just by that simple prayer. But personally, I'm trying to just be a contagion to, kind of inject as many people as I can before my practice goes way more inward, which is heading towards living on an ashram and maybe coming out of the woodworks even more underground. So and to still keep connection to people, but probably not teaching, too many public classes, maybe coming out of the woodworks for more trainings, and hopefully my practice is deepened so much that when I do come out, I have more to offer. That's my wish for being even clearer in helping people or being of service. So that's what interests me personally. And, maybe that it creates a contagion out for other people to have that high level of service, care, and but what's happening in the yoga world, I have a lot of probably points of view. I just, I wish that maybe it's also going back to constantly questioning, hold the question of what kind of a teacher I want to be, or a student I want to be, or what's my focus today? Can I show up? And if you can't, well, be with that. Be with that, and there's something there to investigate. To how interesting, I think the resistances, as much as all the grand devotional gestures, even the resistance is acknowledging that bigger thing exists. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
You're going to be away November and December in India. So I know you're not on social media, Facebook, Twitter, all of that. What are some ways in which people can get in touch with you or find out more about your offerings?
Well, definitely through you, because you're subbing some of my classes actually. But, well, I have a website. It's just my name. Shelley Tomczyk. So you can, there's minimal changes and updates, but I try my best. And what else? I like when people contact me personally. I like relationship to be accessible in that way. And it obviously it can be an email, a phone call, this kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
I'm happy to, and then I'm happy to meet, when I get back. And I even offered that this week. I'm happy to meet with anybody if they want to discuss anything. And so I think that's what you're asking.
I'll put your website on
Yeah.
our show notes so that people can email you if they want to find
Okay,
you.
great. Yeah.
And once again, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.